way of staining the chromosomes, taking a picture of them under a microscope, and then the people who do this for a living then actually separate out the images of the chromosomes and line them up next to each other to assemble what's called a karyotype. Now, in the old days, they used to actually print out the picture and then physically with scissors cut out the pictures and arrange them to make sure all the chromosomes were there. These days, I'm sure it's a computer does it, but anyway, so karyotyping is a way of seeing the chromosomes and inspecting them to make sure that all the chromosomes are there, because there's a family of genetic diseases that are caused by aneuploidy, which means not having the right number of chromosomes. And so that's kind of different from what we've been talking about. Up to this point, I've been telling you genetic diseases are caused by inheriting a bad gene, a recessive gene that's not functioning right. Here, you have all of the genes, you should have all your genes are normal, but you have either too many or too few, because you've got either one too many of a chromosome or one too few of a chromosome. And essentially just throws off your genetic balance. You're supposed to have 2 of every gene. If you have 3 of a chromosome, you've got 3 of all the genes on that chromosome, and that's just not the right number. And so it causes problems. And likewise, if you only have 1 of a certain chromosome that you're supposed to have 2, again, you're not in genetic balance. You're not diploid like you're supposed to be, and problems can result. A very common example of it is something called trisomy 21. If you look at this karyotype, you can see this individual has 3 chromosome 21s, and that's what causes what's called Down syndrome. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but it's the most common example of aneuploidy. Oh yeah, so how could this come about? Well, there's something called non-disjunction that can cause it, and it comes from the parents. When the parents were making their sperm or their eggs, some of the chromosomal movements in meiosis didn't work right, so you ended up with either a sperm or an egg that didn't have the right number of chromosomes. That is non-disjunction. Here's the way it's supposed to work. Imagine this is in the female's ovaries, and she's making some eggs. Normally in meiosis, remember in meiosis 1, homologous pairs of chromosomes are split apart from each other. So if this was her pair of chromosome 21s, let's say, one chromosome 21 goes there and one chromosome 21 goes there. That's proper disjunction, proper splitting apart. And then in meiosis 2, of course, the centromeres divide, and you end up, again, with one chromosome 21 in each of those cells. So that's fine. And so if it worked right, there's going to be 23 chromosomes here, including one chromosome 21. And when it meets up with a sperm carrying 23 chromosomes, the zygote's going to have 46 like it's supposed to, if everything works right. Now let's see some non-disjunction here in the egg production. Non-disjunction, this happens. The 2 homologous chromosomes didn't do what they were supposed to do. They didn't separate in meiosis, and so 2 end up here. So we've got 2 chromosome 21s here in this egg, even though we're only supposed to have 1. And this one doesn't have any chromosome 21s, even though it's supposed to have 1. And you're going to get that same pattern even after meiosis 2. This one's going to have 2 chromosome 21s, 2 chromosome 21s, no chromosome 21s, no chromosome 21s. So here's the grand total. This egg only has 22 chromosomes. This one only has 22. This one has 24 because it's got that extra chromosome 21. This one has 24 total chromosomes because it has that extra chromosome 21. Well, if a normal sperm comes along with its set of 23 chromosomes, then you're going to get a zygote that has 46 chromosomes with that extra chromosome 21. I'm sorry, 47 chromosomes with that extra chromosome 21. Whereas if these eggs get fertilized, the zygote is going to start with 1 too few chromosomes. It's going to be missing one of its chromosome 21s. So what happens? Well, almost always these zygotes, these fertilized eggs, are just never born. It's such a genetic imbalance that the developing embryo is just not able to fully develop, and the woman would have a miscarriage, a spontaneous abortion somewhere along the line. As a matter of fact, when a woman does have a miscarriage, sometimes in the hospitals, they're kind of curious why, and they might do a karyotype on the miscarried embryo, and almost always in miscarried embryos, it's because they see the embryo just had the wrong number of chromosomes. So it's almost like there's some sort of safety device built into pregnancy so that if the wrong number of chromosomes are present, the pregnancy just doesn't go all the way to term. But in some cases it does. There's definitely people who are born with aneuploidy. This chart right here shows some common types of aneuploidy that people are born with. It's kind of interesting. Here they tell you the name of the syndrome, what the chromosome abnormality is, and here it's kind of interesting. They show you of the spontaneous abortions that happen, what percentage, what fraction of those spontaneous abortions are due to that particular aneuploidy, and of the people who are born, what fraction of people who are born have that particular aneuploidy. So you can see trisomy 21 is one of the more common types of aneuploidy. So that is Down syndrome, and it's trisomy 21 because the person is born with 3 chromosome 21s. There's certain characteristics about it. Mental retardation is one. The degree of mental retardation varies quite a bit. For some people with Down syndrome, there's very little. You talk to them, they seem absolutely normal and eloquent as anybody else. But for other people, it's very severe, and they can never really function by themselves in society. And there's also some heart defects that go along also with the trisomy 21. The major factor seems to be the mom's age in regards to the risk of trisomy 21. This is the mom's age versus the likelihood that she'll have a baby with trisomy 21. And so at very young ages, it's very difficult, so to speak, to have a baby with Down syndrome. But the older the mom is, the more likely. If she has a baby around 50, it's almost a 1 in 10 chance that the baby will have Down syndrome. And there's a reason for that. Remember, this is caused by non-disjunction, and a female's eggs are as old as she is. Women develop their eggs even before they're born, and so a 50-year-old woman, her eggs are 50 years old, and in those decades, it's just more and more likely that some of the spindle apparatus will break down, and so you're going to get more likely to have non-disjunction. Now you may say, well, why doesn't that happen to the males? Males kind of use a different system. Males always make their sperm fresh. Even an 80-year-old man, his sperm are only a few months old because males just continuously manufacture fresh sperm. And I always kind of wondered, well, why is that? Why do males make their gametes fresh all the time and females do just the opposite? I don't know, it's just some bizarre fact of biology. But anyway, this is one of the consequences. It's the age of the mother which is at risk for Down syndrome, and not the age of the father. Doctors can do something called amniocentesis if they want to check on the chromosomes of the fetus. In amniocentesis, a needle is inserted into the woman's womb, and a few of the embryonic cells are sampled, and then they can karyotype them and see if the baby has any aneuploidy or not. The problem is there's a small risk of triggering a spontaneous abortion, a miscarriage, and so it's normally only done to older moms because the incidence of Down syndrome is so low with younger moms that it's not considered the risk to do it. But it can happen at any age. this guy I went to high school with, Dave, and his wife, they were married really early, in their early 20s, but their first child did have Down syndrome.
So it's something that's inherited from either the father or the mother, or is it only inherited from them?
Well, I don't know if I want to use the word inherited, but I'm saying it's the age of the mother which is the biggest risk factor.
But the mother would have to have, would have to be heterozygous for that?
No, it's not a problem with the genes. I guess you'd say it's a problem with her proteins. In her egg cells, some of the spindle fibers are broken down, and so they're not able to separate the chromosomes properly in meiosis 1.
Can it happen in meiosis 2?
Yes, it can happen in meiosis 2 also. As a matter of fact, one of the sheets you'll be doing today gives you a chance to work through some problems where you can see what the effects are of this happening in meiosis 1 versus meiosis 2. Okay, so chromosome 21 is one of the autosomes. You can get aneuploidy from some of the sex chromosomes also. I think this chart comes next. Here we go. So notice that there are some syndromes here, poly-X syndrome, Klinefelter's, Jacobs, and Turner syndrome, where the number of X chromosomes is not what they're supposed to be. Let's look at this one called Turner syndrome. In Turner syndrome, the person only gets one X chromosome instead of having two sex chromosomes like you normally expect. And it's sometimes written XO to show that there's 0 other sex chromosome. And you remember what I said earlier, these people are females because it's a lack of a Y chromosome that makes you female. Here's what the karyotype would look like. So the people with Turner syndrome are born female, but because they only have one X chromosome, the development of the female reproductive organs is not normal. This girl here has it. The ovaries are missing, and so she can never have babies because she can't make any eggs. And furthermore, the ovaries manufacture estrogen hormone, which is a feminizing hormone. It causes breast development at puberty and redistribution of body fat and things like that. And so the development of what are called the secondary sex characteristics, these are things that are characteristic of a sex but not really reproductive organs, are also missing in girls with Turner syndrome. Now I'm sure these days, if they identify a girl as having Turner syndrome, they can give her estrogen shots about the time of puberty. But anyway, without those estrogen shots, she would not really develop a female body type. But intelligence doesn't seem to be affected by Turner syndrome. The kind of flip side of the coin there is something called Klinefelter's syndrome, which is where the embryo has one too many sex chromosomes. XXY is what Klinefelter syndrome is. And so these are going to be boys because they have the Y chromosome, or males, I guess I should say. But you have, in a way, kind of similar effects. The testes do not develop properly, so no sperm are produced. So males with Klinefelter syndrome can't themselves have children. And the testes are where testosterone is made, the male hormone. And so the male secondary sex characteristics, like the deep voice and more body musculature that are typical of males, don't develop. And that's what the gentleman here on my right has. And you can see a little bit of feminization of the body, a little bit of breast development, and sort of a more female shape to the body because of the lack of testosterone. Again, it doesn't seem to affect intelligence. It's just more the sex characteristics. And lastly, there's one called Jacobs syndrome, where the boy inherits 2 Y chromosomes. And it doesn't seem to have any symptoms at all. Here we go. You can see here it is XYY, and about 1 in 1,000 births is a boy with Jacobs syndrome. So no real effects whatsoever having an extra Y chromosome, which sort of makes sense because it's such a tiny chromosome, hardly has any genes on it at all, that you're not really that much out of genetic imbalance by having it. There's kind of an interesting historical thing here. When this was first discovered, the guy who discovered it thought it led to violent behavior, which in a way you could almost see, sort of ultra male characteristics. And he claims to have done a study with prisoners in Scottish prisons where he showed that the incidence of violent prisoners who had Jacob's syndrome was higher than the general population. And so a long time it was assumed that this was right, but then further studies couldn't replicate that. And all the studies after that point, they didn't show that it led to any kind of violent behavior. So it's now considered to have no effects whatsoever. Okay, well, I think I talked for a little more longer than I wanted to. So I'll pass out the packets to each group, and kind of the same as before. You can do them individually, or you can work on them as a group. And when you have answers, go ahead and bring them up to me, and I'll verify them.